People were starting to say it's an East Coast, West Coast rivalry because it was people that's trying to make money. It was true people trying to make careers. It was people trying to get famous. Just that I don't want to be involved in the stuff where it's negative stuff.
Hi, how do you do?
I need to talk to him.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't just a rivalry, it was the gasoline-soaked foundation of an inferno that consumed lives, reputations, and an entire generation of hip-hop culture. At the heart of this chaos stood two men, larger than life yet impossibly human in their flaws. Suge Knight and Sean Diddy Combs. On paper, they were moguls, pioneers shaping the genre and building empires. But behind the glitzy facade of platinum records and champagne-soaked parties were power moves that blurred the line between business strategy and open warfare. To understand the magnitude of their animosity is to understand why, decades later, their battle has reignited in a courtroom, with Suge Knight delivering testimony that could shatter everything we thought we knew about Diddy.
And Tupac's a legend. Like I said, Tupac wasn't born, he was sent to us.
Picture the setting, a sterile courtroom packed with legal teams, reporters, and onlookers hungry for drama. Suge Knight, once the towering, unflinching boss of Death Row Records, now sits in a suit that hangs off his diminished frame, his eyes sharp, but his voice gravelly with age and wear. Across from him sits Diddy, calm and collected, his tailored attire a stark contrast to the storm brewing around him. But don't let the quiet demeanor fool you. This isn't just another legal skirmish. This is a reckoning, decades in the making, where every word, Feud pulls at the thread of a narrative that could unravel Diddy's carefully crafted legacy.
You know, and they're more important to the police on the streets than in here, because they let them know what's going on.
Suge isn't just making accusations. He's pulling skeletons out of closets that people didn't even know existed. He claims that Diddy's ambition wasn't just aggressive, it was ruthless, even sinister. At the center of these allegations lies the assassination of Shakur, a tragedy that has haunted the hip-hop world for nearly 3 decades. According to Suge, this wasn't a random act of violence in a chaotic rivalry. It was calculated, orchestrated, and, if you believe Suge's testimony, greenlit by none other than Diddy himself. The courtroom gasped when Suge described alleged conversations off-the-record meetings between Diddy and individuals with connections to the streets, where the ultimate goal was to neutralize a threat to Bad Boy's dominance. And by neutralize, Suge meant eliminating Shakur, the crown jewel of Death Row Records and the very embodiment of West Coast defiance.
The listen thing I'm gonna tell you. We from two different worlds, number one, him and I.
The details are chilling. Suge recounts how the feud wasn't just about record sales or chart dominance. It was personal. It was about retaliation and pride. He points to the infamous Source Awards in 1995, where Suge famously took to the stage and called out Diddy without naming him, telling artists they didn't need producers dancing in their videos. A jab so pointed it may as well have been a declaration of war. According to Suge, Diddy saw that moment not as an insult but as a threat, a crack in his armor that needed to be sealed permanently. Suge claims that from then on, the feud escalated behind the scenes, with both men allegedly pulling strings that would bring the tension to a boiling point.
There's no punishment. If they protected by the road, the judge.
But Suge doesn't stop there. His testimony dives into specifics, painting a grim picture of how Diddy allegedly operated during the peak of the feud. He alleges that Diddy wasn't just running Bad Boy Entertainment, he was running a network of influence that extended deep into the streets, leveraging alliances and making promises to people who could get their hands dirty while he stayed squeaky clean. One of the most damning claims involves a figure referred to only as Victim 3 in court documents, a woman who Suge alleges had firsthand knowledge of Diddy's darker deal. Her testimony was supposed to be a key piece of the prosecution's case, until she mysteriously disappeared. Suge doesn't mince words. He suggests that her absence isn't a coincidence, adding yet another layer of intrigue to an already murky narrative.
You know, when it comes to rewriting history, it's trying to rewrite history.
Diddy's defense team, unsurprisingly, is working overtime to discredit Suge. They argue that he's a man with nothing left to lose, someone who sees throwing Diddy under the bus as his last-ditch attempt at relevance. They paint him as a manipulator, a master of spinning stories to suit his own agenda. But Suge seems unbothered. He's been in this game too long to let courtroom theatrics rattle him. His words are deliberate, his tone unwavering, as he lays out a timeline of events that paints Diddy not as a mogul but as a mastermind. He references whispers of backroom deals and coded conversations, the kind of under-the-table maneuvering that makes you question how much of the music industry we see is real, and how much of it is just smoke and mirrors. And then there's the Shakur connection, the thread that ties everything together. Suge describes his relationship with Shakur as more than just professional. Shakur wasn't just an artist on Death Row's roster, he was family. Suge recalls the night of the infamous Las Vegas drive-by, detailing how the two of them were riding together, laughing and talking about future plans just minutes before it all went down. To hear Suge tell it, the attack wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the culmination of a plan set into motion weeks, maybe even months earlier. He alleges that Diddy's fingerprints are all over it, from the people involved to the timing of the attack. And while Suge stopped short of naming names in open court, his implications are clear and devastating.
DVD named Diddy 77 times in court documents related to Tupac's.
What makes this all the more compelling is the mountain of circumstantial evidence that seems to support Suge's claims. Investigative reports from the time suggest that the East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't just a battle between record labels. It was a street-level conflict involving gangs, alliances, and financial incentives that blurred the lines between business and brutality. Court documents reveal that the FBI had been monitoring both Death Row and Bad Boy during this period, suspecting that their operations extended far beyond music. And yet, despite years of investigations and countless rumors, no one has ever been held accountable for Shakur's assassination. Suge's testimony, if true, could change that. Meanwhile, the public is glued to every development, dissecting Suge's words like lyrics to a long-lost track. Social media is ablaze with theories, memes, and heated debates, with fans and critics alike taking sides. Some see Suge as a whistleblower, finally exposing the truth after years of silence. Others dismiss him as a bitter man grasping at straws, trying to drag Diddy down with him. But one thing is clear. This isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a cultural moment. It's a chance to revisit one of the most pivotal eras in hip-hop history and ask the question that has haunted fans for decades. What really happened?
The only man currently facing charges in the case, Dwayne "Keefe D. Davis, claims that Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, paid for a hit on Tupac.
As the tension in the courtroom builds, there's a sense that this is only the beginning. Suge's testimony has cracked open a Pandora's box of allegations, but the lid hasn't been fully lifted yet. What else is lurking in the shadows, waiting to come to light? And how far will Diddy go to protect the empire he built? The answers, it seems, are still out there, just beyond reach, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. And just when you think the courtroom drama couldn't get more tangled, the story takes a sinister turn. Suge Knight's explosive claims weren't just about personal vendettas or industry rivalries. They're pulling the curtain back on a deeper, darker motivation that goes beyond music. It's about power, legacy, and control. And when power is threatened, desperate people do desperate things. Allegedly, it wasn't just about silencing rivals, it was about securing dominance in a billion-dollar industry where failure wasn't an option.
Right now, Davis is fighting for bail ahead of his trial, which he has pleaded not.
The financial stakes in this saga are staggering. At the time of the East Coast-West Coast feud, the hip-hop industry was skyrocketing in value, with record labels transforming from street-level hustles into corporate powerhouses. Diddy's Bad Boy Entertainment wasn't just a label, it was a brand, a movement, and, arguably, a global empire in the making. But with all that success came mounting pressure. The rivalry wasn't just a clash of egos. It was a battle for market share, for cultural relevance, and for the kind of influence that could make or break careers. And according to those close to the situation, Diddy wasn't just playing to win, he was playing to dominate, to eliminate competition in the most ruthless way possible. Court records and insider accounts paint a picture of a man who knew the stakes and was willing to take the gloves off. At the peak of the feud, Bad Boy and Death Row were essentially neck and neck, each boasting artists who were churning out platinum hits. But while Suge was cultivating an image of raw, unfiltered aggression, Diddy was presenting himself as the polished, business-savvy mogul. Behind the scenes, however, it was a different story. Allegations suggest that Diddy's moves weren't just about outsmarting his opponents. They were about outlasting them, whatever the cost.
Yes. He hated every bit of it. I remember one time, he was like, who who did you grow up listening to? I'm like, Tupac. I ain't mentioned Biggie. That nigga ain't even talk to me for like 4 fucking days after that. Everything with Pac, like, you couldn't say Pac was anything better than Biggie.
But where does ambition cross the line? That's the question hanging in the air as the prosecution delves into Diddy's alleged financial motivations. Legal filings hint at a pattern of behavior that points to a calculated strategy, not just to win the game, but to rewrite the rules entirely. And this strategy wasn't limited to the studio or the boardroom. It extended into the streets, where alliances were forged, favors were traded, and whispers of deals that couldn't exist on paper began to surface. And that's where the whispers get even louder. According to court filings leaked to the press, a confidential informant has come forward claiming that Diddy's financial dealings during the height of the feud weren't just aggressive, they were potentially illegal. The informant alleges that funds from Bad Boy Entertainment were quietly funneled into off-the-books payments to unknown consultants with known street affiliations. These payments, described in the documents as promotional expenses, allegedly correspond to key moments in the feud, including the weeks leading up to the infamous Las Vegas incident. Prosecutors, however, are being tight-lipped about how this new evidence ties into the case, but the implication alone is enough to send shockwaves through the industry. If true, it suggests that the line between business and the streets wasn't just blurred, it was intentionally erased.
Diddy hated Pac. Facts. hated his guts. Hated him.
Even more troubling are the connections being drawn between these alleged payments and a series of incidents that took place far from the spotlight. Investigators have pointed to a pattern of intimidation and coercion, targeting individuals who were either critical of Bad Boy or associated with death row. One particularly chilling account involves a former death row employee who claims he was harassed and followed after he publicly accused Diddy of unethical practices. This employee has since disappeared from the public eye, but his testimony from years ago is now being revisited in light of these new allegations. It paints a picture of an industry where silence wasn't just encouraged, it was enforced. And then there's the matter of Diddy's clean image. While Suge Knight's aggressive persona made him an easy target for criticism, Diddy has long been seen as the polished mogul, the savvy businessman who rose above the chaos of the feud. But these new revelations threaten to crack that facade. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Diddy's public persona may have been carefully constructed to distract from what was happening behind the scenes. The contrast between his suit-wearing exterior and the alleged dealings in the shadows makes the accusations all the more shocking. And for those who idolized him as a symbol of success, the possibility that he may have orchestrated something far darker is a betrayal that's hard to stomach.
Today, just to tell the truth, so hopefully we can get down to the bottom of this. I'm 100%, the charges against me are 100% false, and hopefully due to time, we'll start to see that.
One name keeps coming up in courtroom whispers, a figure who allegedly acted as a middleman in deals that were never meant to see the light of day. This individual, whose identity remains under wraps for now, is said to have brokered connections between industry executives and key players on the streets. According to testimony, this shadowy go-between operated with the kind of discretion that hinted at something more than just business. It wasn't just about promoting records or signing talent, it was about control, influence, and ensuring that certain problems disappeared before they became liabilities. The courtroom tension escalated further with new revelations about the disappearance of victim 3. This mysterious witness, who was expected to provide testimony that could have turned the tide of the trial, has vanished without explanation. Prosecutors have admitted they're unable to reach her or her attorney, and rumors are swirling about what, or who, might be behind her sudden absence. Her testimony, according to insiders, was supposed to include first-hand accounts of interactions with Diddy's inner circle that could have exposed connections no one wanted revealed. Without her, a key piece of the puzzle is missing, leaving both the prosecution and the public grappling with unsettling questions.
In her civil lawsuit, Cassie said that she was the victim of abuse, assault, and at the hands of Diddy.
And then there's the personal side of this story, the raw, unresolved animosity that has festered for decades. While financial motivations are one thing, the personal tensions between Diddy and his rivals take this saga to another level. Those close to the situation describe a relationship between Diddy and Suge that was volatile from the start. When Suge took the stage at the Source Awards and fired that infamous verbal shot, it wasn't just a public humiliation, it was a challenge. And according to those in the know, Diddy didn't take challenges lightly. Insiders claim that Diddy's frustration with Suge wasn't just about Shakur or Death Row. It was about what Suge represented. Suge was everything Diddy wasn't: brash, unapologetically aggressive, and unwilling to play by the industry's unspoken rules. For Diddy, who had built his empire on a foundation of polished professionalism, Suge's rise was more than a problem, it was a threat. And when threats couldn't be neutralized through business, they had to be handled another way.
A U.S. judge has ruled that the rapper and producer Sean Diddy Combs will stand trial on federal trafficking and racketeering charges in May. He'll be held in prison until then. Sean Combs has pleaded not guilty to charges that he used his business empire to transport women and male workers across state lines to take part in recorded performances. If convicted, he could face a life sentence.
This brings us back to the courtroom, where the stakes have never been higher. Diddy's legal team is fighting tooth and nail to dismantle the prosecution's case, painting their client as a victim of baseless accusations and opportunistic witnesses. But the prosecution isn't backing down. They're pushing forward with a narrative that suggests Diddy's success wasn't just the result of talent and hard work. It was the culmination of a strategy that blurred the lines between ambition and ruthlessness. And with every new revelation, the line between fact and fiction becomes harder to distinguish. What's undeniable, though, is the impact this trial is having on the hip-hop community. For many, it's a painful reminder of a time when artistry and violence became inextricably linked. For others, it's an opportunity to finally get answers to questions that have lingered for decades. And for Diddy, it's a fight for his legacy, a battle to prove that the empire he built was earned, not taken. But as the trial unfolds, one thing becomes clear. The truth, whatever it may be, won't come without consequences.
Now, to the latest on the arrest of Sean Diddy Combs. This one has so many people talking. The disgraced music mogul facing federal racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking charges. Both the prosecution and defense teams are set to discuss the next phase of action following the indictment as investigators work to determine potential co-conspirators. But how exactly did we get here?
Here's the thing. This story isn't just about Diddy or Suge or even Shakur. It's about the cost of ambition, the price of power, and the lengths people will go to protect what they've built. So what do you think? Is this just another chapter in a long history of industry drama, or is there something more sinister at play? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and trust us, this story isn't over yet. We'll see you in the next one.